what convinced you paranormal activity actually occurs or is real? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You Handsome Mike here. I also had a haunted bathroom. The shampoo bottle and shaving cream can used to fall into the metal bathtub with a huge clang clang just as I was falling asleep. It became such a regular occurrence that I stopped getting up to look at it. One time it happened, I shouted it to stop effing doing that, and it never happened again. I didn't believe in that BS until it happened to me. I grew up in an old house in Maine, so old that previous residents were buried in the side yard with poorly carved headstones. In my bedroom was an access door to the eaves, which was used for storage. The door could only be opened by an adult and only closed if you slammed it shut with your shoulder. My dad would have to really throw his weight into it. One evening in my teens, after having a really long day and I was tired and cranky, I just wanted to fall into an oblivious sleep. Right as I was drifting off to sleep, the access door opened slowly with the most annoying creaking sound. My oldest sister had always swore the house was haunted, but I never bought into it. But I sat up in my bed, and the opening was darker than anything I've ever seen. I wasn't freaked out. I was pissed. I was tired and not in the mood for this shit. I told the opening very angrily that whatever you think you're doing, to knock it the F off, or I'll find a way to make sure you make it to hell. The door slammed shut, and after fuming as only an angry teen can do, I eventually fell asleep. Never happened again. My father died in the spring. The following winter, while visiting my mother, there was a loud noise from the basement. I couldn't figure out what caused it, but found a puddle next to the furnace. The condensate pump had broken very recently. There was no reason to go into that room if I hadn't been trying to find what caused the noise. We wouldn't have found the problem until it had caused damage. The next day, I found a scrub brush that hadn't been used, likely for months, had fallen off a shelf. I believe that was my dad watching over my mom and the house. I think I was 5 or 6 years old and was alone in the bath when I saw an older man sitting on the closed toilet lid facing me in the bathtub. I jumped out and ran downstairs to my mom, sobbing my eyes out. I told her what he looked like, and the next day she took me to my grandmother's house and showed me the wall with all the family photos on it, and I immediately pointed out my great-grandfather's picture. I never met the man. He died way before I was born. Ever since then, me and my mother have been sure that it was my great-grandfather visiting us for some unknown reason. A few odd things have caught my attention, but I think I've shared them. These are just from one home when I was living with my grandparents in their 100-plus-year-old home. I was usually an early riser, and my grandmother used to yell at me to go back to sleep if she checked in on me in the mornings. I had all sorts of books to read and notepads to doodle in, so I was good at keeping quiet. My room was in the attic. The only light switch was at the bottom of the stairs, so it was actually pretty apparent when someone was heading up. My grandfather had a closet with some nice shirts up there outside my room, so a few mornings he would head up before dressing for the day. My grandfather died the day prior, and I was quietly sketching something or other. I was really mindful of being quiet, as I knew my grandmother was having a tough time losing her husband and all. The light went on, heard someone coming the steps, and went into totally sleeping mode. Tossed the sketch pad and waited for the sound of the door opening and to show my grandmother I was super asleep. I heard some noises in the closet and then the steps going down the stairs and the lights click off. I figured my grandmother was picking out one of the nice shirts as there was a funeral to arrange. Later that morning, when it was acceptable for me to be awake, I head on down for breakfast. With all the hospital drama and his health, my grandmother said she slept very well as she no longer needed to worry about any incoming calls with bad news. She already got the bad news. In fact, she only just woke up. To which I said, "No, I heard you messing with hangers in the closet." She insisted she only just got up and I didn't know how to feel. The second item was a few years later. If my grandmother had guests over, we could not be in our pajamas. Not sure how typical that is. She had some odd rules. I was maybe 15 for this one. I was heading down for the morning, and I could hear the sound of coffee brewing and what sounded like a spoon hitting the side of a mug, which I assumed was my grandmother with her morning tea. She only made coffee when company was over. Typically, with the rule about how to dress when folks were over, I'd get a heads up so I could be presentable before they showed. Hearing the muffled chatter and coffee brewing, I was pretty peeved to have to go get dressed already. No warning, so I grumbled through the whole morning. Go get dressed, yada yada. I'm listening, trying to pin the voice of whoever is over. Just know it's a woman talking. I actually stood at the top of the stairs before moving to assess, as she had a few specific friend groups, trying to be a good teen and all to say hello and good morning. Once my foot touched the third, maybe fourth step, all sound stopped. No more coffee brewing, no clinking spoons, no chatting, just a dark, silent kitchen. There were a few times after that where I'd be upstairs and would hear laughing, television jingles, chatting when no one was down there. I would just listen for a while, and it always stopped by the time I got to the middle of the stairs. Brother's home. They always had trouble with plumbing, lighting, appliances, disastrous consequences behind multi-failure causing flooding, fires, forcing them to move out temporarily for multiple remediations over time. One time, they asked me to stay over and sit the house and dog while they went on vacation. I slept there 5 nights, and something happened every night. The best night, I was laying on the couch watching TV after midnight. The dog was curled up with me when suddenly, plain as can be, came 3 knocks at their back patio door. The door itself and wall were all glass windows. I could see through to the whole patio. No one was there. As if to punctuate, the dog raised his head and low growled at the door, but didn't get up and rush it barking like he does when someone comes to the front door. I got up, opened the door, and went out back to look around. When I came back inside, the dog was sitting in the middle of the living room, barking at the ceiling for no particular reason. Their alarm used to go off too, summoning the police that got so exasperated at the no problem found, they threatened to start charging for non-emergencies. The last night there, their alarm went off after I left, summoning me back to the house to also find no reason for it. Bro seemed to be in denial over it, but eventually sold the house. He had invested a ton of money remodeling, wanted to stay in it. To this day, won't admit it was haunted, but also won't state why he sold it. Back when I was in high school, I was at my girlfriend's house at night. I was 15 and couldn't drive yet, so my mom had to come pick me up. It was probably around midnight when she got there. As usual, we were saying our goodbyes. We were standing at the front door. You can see the driveway and the front yard from the door. There were no lights on outside of the house, so it was very dark outside. I was hugging her, facing the door so I could see the driveway and the yard, and I saw a shadow rip across the driveway, behind my mom's car and down the hill. When I say rip, I mean this thing was moving as fast as a cheetah. I live on the US East Coast. No, it wasn't a cheetah. The speed that it was moving at, and considering the slope of the hill on the side of the driveway, something with any mass would have taken flight off the edge of the driveway. But this thing just stuck to the ground like it was on a track. As I mentioned, it was very dark outside, but I was able to see it. It appeared to be darker than night. It didn't really have any defined shape to it, kind of just a blur, but it was probably 2 to 3 feet tall and very long, roughly 6 to 7 feet long. When I saw it, I kind of jumped back and told her that I thought I just saw something, but I truly believed that it was just my eyes playing a trick on me since it was late. So I start going out to get in my mom's car in the driveway. She was parked with the front of the car facing away from the house, probably 50 feet away. I got in the car and she started to drive away. We went about our drive home chatting, and then I said to her, I could have sworn I saw a shadow bolt across the driveway and down the hill when you were waiting for me. When I said this, she told me afterwards she felt the blood drain out of her. Apparently, she saw the same thing, but didn't want to scare me by telling me. Except how I saw it go across the driveway left to right, behind her and down the hill. She saw it moving at the same insane speed away from the house to her right, along the driveway, and disappeared into the woods. The house has a very long driveway with a wooded area on either side. She described it the exact same way as what I saw, and the path in which it moved aligned exactly with her sighting. Still to this day, both of us get chills when we bring it up. 7 years ago, I played PS4 a lot and would game for hours on end. I didn't pay much attention to what was happening. Basement door randomly opening at 1 to 5 a.m. when I clearly slammed it closed. Front and back door rattling, as if someone was turning the knob back and forth. Looking back, I didn't think anything of it. Now, I truly do believe in that stuff. 90% of the paranormal activities are so poorly faked though, so I'm really not surprised people don't believe in it. Truth be told, most of them probably will never believe it unless it happens to them. I'd had friends tell me stories of using Ouija boards saying all the clocks in the room stopped. That makes me believe it even more. I was cleaning out a deceased person's home, started working on their wardrobe, and the light went out. Then I turned on the bedside lamps and they started flickering like mad. I got a little nervous since I was there alone, so I said that I was just going to collect their items to bring to Goodwill and that I was going to take good care of their things. Then the flickering stopped. I truly believe there's more between heaven and earth that we are aware of and or can explain, and that's okay. I lived in a house that is about 200 years old a few years back, and often when I was alone I felt company, and sometimes when I walked in the hallway I felt like something was watching me in the dark corner. Fun fact, during World War II, the people living there used the living room wall as a shooting practice. It was basically two apartments linked together and later made to a big house, so it had some length to it. Can't say this convinced me, but it is hard to explain. Was staying with some in-laws in their very old home for a few days. One night we started discussing the history of the home. The subject came up since the house is mentioned in a local history book they kept on their living room coffee table. Half joking, I asked if they believed the house was haunted. Right after I asked the question, a light went on over the staircase next to the living room. We all turned to look at it. Then, after a moment, it just turned itself off. Everyone just looked at each other and laughed it off. Perhaps it was faulty wiring or something of that nature, but the timing really makes me stop and think. Had some things happen in my home after my father passed away, but nothing I couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation for. The light over the staircase, though, still baffles me. I was about 12 or 13 in the bathroom of my local AMC movie theater. It was during the middle of the movie, so I was rushing to get back to my seat so I didn't miss too much. I was alone in the 4-stall bathroom in the handicapped stall. The 3 stalls next to me were completely empty. The socially anxious part of me always checked before selecting a stall. There was a little sink inside of the handicapped stall without a mirror, so after doing my business and quickly washing my hands, I turned around, and standing there as plain as day was a little girl, aged 6 or so. She was glaring at me with so much hate that I was actually taken aback. She stood there completely still, just glaring. She wasn't breathing either. It was almost like she was a hologram. That's how still she was. My first instinct was to tell her off, since I used to babysit kids her age and had little patience for that kind of behavior. But something about the whole situation felt off. I'd only been washing my hands for a few seconds, so I knew there was no way she could have sprinted across the entire room, crawled under my stall, and stood behind me in that time frame, let alone done so without me hearing it. The sink wasn't that loud, and the bathroom was tiled. You couldn't even tiptoe across it without making noise. And as I mentioned, all of the stalls were empty when I entered, and no one entered the room in the time I was in there. I would have heard it. Every part of me was telling me to say nothing and get the hell out of there. It almost felt like everyone was holding their breath, even though she and I were the only ones there. You know that tense feeling in the air when everybody's dreading something that's about to happen? That's the only way I can describe it. Anyway, all I ended up doing was let out a surprised "oh" before speed walking back to my seat. I was so freaked out that I decided to wait outside for her to see if she would come out of the only exit after the movie ended. That way, if I saw her, I could tell myself she was just a bored kid playing a stupid prank. But she never came out. My siblings didn't see her in the bathroom either. I refused to go back in. I told my mother afterwards, but she thought I was crazy. To be fair, it sounded crazy to me too. So yeah, I didn't even believe in ghosts at that age, but after that bizarre experience, I wasn't so sure. TLDR. An angry little girl materialized in a bathroom stall at my local movie theater. Scared the hell out of me. The most generic paranormal story ever happened to me, actually. Me and my friend were playing basketball while his parents weren't home during the night. I believe this was winter, so it wasn't late, like 8 p.m. or anything like that. We were playing in his driveway with the hoop at the end of it. On the back side of the hoop, there was a hill that led to his backyard. Now, of course, since it was dark as shit that night, you could barely see a thing down there. While we were playing, my friend shot an air ball, and we both watched it roll down the hill. Now, since prior to this we weren't worried about shit, we went into his backyard with our phone flashlights, searching his entire backyard with no luck. We literally looked everywhere, until we gave up and decided we'd look for it the following day when there was more light, and proceeded to head back up the hill out of the darkness. Once we reached the top of the hill, to our surprise, the ball was sitting in the middle of the court. And the craziest part that I forgot to mention is that the grass was moist, so whenever the ball got it, the grass, it would be covered in wet grass and shit. The wet grass and all the extra was literally on the ball, but the ball was in the center of the driveway, where we typically check up, covered in the grass and dirt, even though we clearly saw that shit roll down the hill. We both asked no questions and ran straight into his house with questions asked. We basically ran into his room and with his door locked until his parents got home to give me a ride back because I was scared shitless. TLDR. When me and my friend were younger playing basketball, we watched a missed shot roll into the darkest of his backyard. We rigorously searched for it in said backyard. We got tired and went to get a new ball, and the ball magically reappeared at the top of the driveway.